last night on the working group, I'm talking to you guys like you don't know. You were all bloody there. I saw you all. So David Seymour is being blamed for releasing the worst people in New Zealand. I think Matthew Tukaki in this says something like, the people that used to hide in the corners of our lounges now feel emboldened to come out because of what David Seymour's doing. Also very interesting to watch this, because this is Damian Grant has ownership in this program, how much more directive he was in the chat versus a particular chat he had a few weeks ago with Matthew Hooton, which might have potentially caused them some problems. So that's something interesting to watch out for as well. So let's start the conversation. And there is this is pretty hard to watch. Would it be fair to say, Cho? Especially what Matt shares, because he's sharing about personal experience of being racistly being abused by racists racially. So let's just get into it though, because it's a very good conversation from those two gentlemen, and your particularly useless and awful conversation from Kermit.
The next point is we're going to Seymour. What's Seymour getting out of this? Luxon likes to tell us that Seymour's there's been a compromise. He's not getting his referendum, but he's getting his bill, and it's going to have its day in court. Seymour has won completely on this one. 6 months of a select committee.
Right.
Getting the bill in the public domain in this way gives him the opportunity to stomp up and down the country, stirring up racism.
Such
I know, and we've had this debate before, but that is exactly let me finish.
I apologise. I think on the last week's show for calling somebody an anti-Semite when my blood pressure got the better of me. I was wrong to make that statement. You do not have a window into somebody else's soul. We've had this discussion with you before. It is a lazy and...
He does seem a little bit more on edge about these accusations than perhaps he once was. I wonder what that's all about.
It's always difficult when it hits close to home.
Yeah.
Seen the racism he stirs up. I've seen it.
Hang on. As the Māori,
that is utterly despicable to accuse somebody of racism.
Let me share something with you.
So we'll come back to
as a Māori in the room, I feel downtrodden, I feel suppressed, I feel hurt. I honestly do feel that a pack of racists are coming for me and my people. For what? For some political outcome? So, yeah, the feeling, I'm sorry, is real. I do feel that there is a significant racist element to this discussion, and I know this because when you have a look at the people that comment on things on social media, in community groups and chats, it's just incredible. It's like a typhoon of hatred has been loose in this country by one man. Who then walks away from the grenade he's thrown in there and said, oh, no, I just want to debate. Well, actually, that debate is seeing people call other people the worst of names. And not only online, but in person, in workplaces, at parties, in bars, on streets, in supermarkets. This is what is going on as a result of this debate, and the very real fact that we're having this discussion.
Yes.
And I'm surrounded by well-meaning, lovely human beings who happen to be Pākehā. As the Māori in the room, I'm telling you, I am hurt, and that is a fact.
And is that a justification to silence the debate? Well, hold on.
We're not talking about silence. The debate isn't silence. The debate silence the debate in this country.
How have I, as a Māori, attempted to silence this debate in this country that has been going on for decades?
Because you are saying that David Seymour is stirring up racism.
He is
by having
it's
that issue.
It's a fact. He is.
It's actually on some level quite a gracious thing that he's saying, because he's actually not calling David Seymour a racist. He's saying
he's stirring it up.
He's stirring up racists. And Damian Grant seems particularly nervous about accusations of racism at the moment. But what Matt's actually saying is the vernacular, the things that David Seymour is talking about is stirring up racists. He may or may not think David Seymour is. I don't know. But he's saying it's being stirred up. And then he's giving the evidence, which is his personal experience, that he is seeing racists and hearing from them. And this is where perhaps there is some a word that may offend some people, but it's real life. Certainly for Matt Tukaki, and maybe many other Māori Pacifica people around the country at the moment, who from people who are feeling emboldened by this quote-unquote debate.
Creating an operating environment, Damian, where people think that it's okay now to come out of the dark corners and call me a nigger. And that is a fact. People have called me that word, and I hate to say that word, but that is what I get called. Now, that makes me cry.
Simon, hasn't the left... Simon had another point.
Well, I was just going to say that if we go back to the treaty,
yes,
the treaty is a contract.
Yep.
The treaty is a legal document. It is a founding legal document in this country, and it is essentially a contract. And the contract isn't among all New Zealanders. The contract is between the Crown and Māori, their representatives being the rangatira.
I thought it was the chiefs. But that's a big difference. And you go back and you read.
I feel it all this and coming on.
Well, that was one of the issue in the lands case. The issue was this a contract between the chiefs of iwis or was it a contract between the races, a treaty between the races? They are different concepts, Simon. The distinction, I think, is important.
Simon, hasn't the left...
No, Simon, you want to continue that point.
You might have to think about the meaning of rangatira, but... it is a contract between the signatories, and as a contract between the signatories, if there is a demand for the nation...
Can I just say, not to interrupt, just want to put this out there. I love Simon Wilson. He's lovely.
I would listen to that man read a phone book.
Oh, I just love what he's about to say. I know what's coming. Some of you do. I love Simon Wilson. I would bear his children were it possible.
Between the signatories, if there is a demand for the nation as a whole thinking, are we going to rethink our founding documents? Are we going to do this process? You don't start with stirring up the racist. You start with the signatories to the document and their descendants actually having a properly formalised discussion. If the Crown thinks that we should reform the Treaty of Waitangi, the Crown needs to be talking to iwi, to the leaders of iwi, about what that might mean. Though I don't think the Crown does think that, so we shouldn't be having this discussion in the way we are having.
Let me read this fact to you. This is something that has caused me a lot of angst in the last 24 hours. It's from somebody online who says, hey, iwi, if you want to save your dying language, you can pay for it and do yourselves and do it yourselves. It's not up to the taxpayers. It has zero value. This is the sort of individual in our country that David Seymour and his ilk are stirring up. Sadly, it is the same sort of ilk that have been hiding in the dark corners of our lounge rooms across the country for some years now. And also, the rubbishing of Te Tiriti o Waitangi is not a new phenomenon. It's been going on for a long time. And so, you know, what value is this creating to a country that's trying to project itself forward as a great nation, as Christopher Luxon might call it? We're not a great nation. We're on the cusp of looking like a pack of heathen idiots.
All right.
So, I love Simon Wilson. I love it because it's true. I don't love it because we've said it as well. I love it because it's true. We've used the example, I've got a contract with my bank. The neighbour doesn't get a chance to speak into my contract with my bank. And that's been the example we've been giving here all year about this quote-unquote referendum, is that there are two signatories to this document. There is Māori and there is the Crown. I'm sorry, Mr. Seymour, but no, not everybody who arrives in the country gets to participate in that contract by deciding what's what. And it's exactly right. And we've echoed that here as well. If you want to have this conversation, and remember, even Chloe says this conversation can be had, but she always says, but you don't approach it with a binary outcome. So these conversations can happen, but to have these conversations, you speak to the signatories. The Crown needs to approach Māori, or maybe Māori wants to approach the Crown and go, look, we've got this agreement, guys. We've got this deal that's going on. Should we have a look at it together? No, not the latest person who's moved here from Greenland. They're not going to have a say in our contract because our contract is between us two. I mean, they can be the beneficiaries of it by living here and, you know, the way we set it up, but they don't get to jump in and say, this is how this contract should be. I've been in New Zealand for 2 minutes and I don't really know your culture. Chewy.
It's an amazing point by Simon. I literally have not heard someone suggest the same thing, that if we're going to look at the treaty, we should do it with the descendants of the signatories.
Of course.
Is an amazing point to make. And I'm not I'm surprised that Damian did just dissolve like he got Thanos snapped out of it, because it is such a good point.
I mean, again, you can bring it back to the house thing. Should someone pass away, in fact, this has happened to me in the last 18 months. My father passed away, so the descendants of my father had to deal with all the contracts that my father had signed and sort them out. How's that any different? Not the neighbours in Dad's apartment block. They didn't deal with it, right? The new people, none of those. It was the descendants of my father, his children, who had to deal with all the contracts and deal with all the bank stuff and do all of that kind of stuff. Anything he'd signed, who he wasn't here any longer to respond to, his descendants had to sort it out. Just because these descendants are 6 or 7 generations ago, or 8 or 9 or whatever it is, same.
I just want to talk about what Matthew said there as well.
Yep.
Now, Damian might not believe that that's true, but I think all of us have either seen it or can find it really, really easily. You duck into a Facebook comment field about anything to do with Māori. I saw the Herald put up a story the other day that a road that's being built has come across the remains of a Māori pa, and so costs on that road have increased because they've made an archaeological discovery.
Yep.
The comments below it were disgusting. And it was just a screed of anti-Māori ignorance. And you can find it anywhere on social media at the moment. This debate has given oxygen to some of this country's most hateful, ignorant people. And it's casualized those comments to a degree that I'm not comfortable with. And I think the end result of this is that we need to make racists ashamed again.
This is the reason it's also hypocrisy and ridiculousness was if that road had come across an archaeological dig that was, say, a World War I soldiers' number of graves, they wouldn't have this. And I'm saying this arrogant, I can prove it. I know those same people making those same comments would not be making them about all of a sudden there's a cost increase to this road because they've just come across a World War I, a place that a whole bunch of World War I veterans or soldiers were laid. They wouldn't. So that's when it becomes about race. That's when the undertones are racist. Simple.
There was literally an example of that story that you described, very, very close to it. A farmer discovered in a bunch of overgrown blackberry bushes a post-World War I ex-soldiers workman's hut. And all the comments under that, it's like, oh, it must be preserved and it must be preserved for future generations and it should be bought by the state and all of this sort of stuff.
Yeah.
It must be preserved because it's white people history.
Yeah. And we've
seen
seen
those stories separated by about a week.
Yeah, we've seen that here in Dunedin. I'm sure most places has. If you've got, like, for example, an incorrect spelling of a Māori place name, when it's brought up that maybe we should get the right spelling, people lose their minds. But there's been examples in Mosgiel of a Scottish settler's name spelt incorrectly on a road sign. And of course, we must fix this immediately. This must be fixed. It's exactly the same. All right, this part of the conversation is really important as well, because I don't think Damian, look, I do try and be respectful, and I'm saying this with respect. I don't think Damian gets it. I actually don't think he gets it. I don't think he understands, because he starts in this conversation to talk about when he gets abuse. And again, he has to have it explained to him how when Damian Grant receives abuse for something he's written, it's very different from someone receiving abuse because of their race or their culture. Let's play this bit.
In terms of personal abuse, look, every Sunday I get a whole pile of personal abuse. And sometimes the personal abuse is enough that it made me get off Twitter for a while because the level of... So I understand what personal...
Oh, so he has to get off Twitter for a while. That's the hardship that this man has. The hardship from what Matthew's talking about goes back to things like lands being stolen. But, Damian Grant has to get off Twitter. So it's same really, isn't it, Chewy? Get off Twitter for an afternoon. Lots of Māori are fighting to have their generational lands returned them. That's about the same, isn't it? I think it's pretty close. Surely.
I don't think that he's really measured these two things correctly, People might say that he sounds like a demented Kermit the Frog or he's a twice convicted fraudster. Nobody's saying that his bloodline should be ended and all of his works erased.
Yeah. Well, let's go on and see how he gets it explained to him.
Enough that it made me get off Twitter for a while, because the level of... So I understand what personal hatred is like, because I cop an awful lot of it myself personally. But the fact that people behave in that way doesn't mean... and I don't think anybody is saying, oh, we need to rip up the treaty, as you said before. The issue under discussion, and I think it's a valid issue, and from my perspective, it's a narrow one. What are the principles of the Treaty of Waitangi? What are they, and what do those principles, if they exist, and I'm not convinced that they do, but if they exist, what does that practically mean going forward? Because we have seen an enormous shift in the last 30 years, where you have things like Mano Atawai, you have things like customary title now being debated before the courts. These are significant constitutional issues, and the fact that some people act like racist idiots doesn't mean that we can't or shouldn't have that debate. There are racist idiots in Te Pāti Māori, and some of the things that they have said has been utterly disgraceful. But they are still allowed to say what they say. Simon.
Can I just say, Damian, that there is a difference between the kind of abuse that you get personally, and I get that too when I write something. And it doesn't really matter who gets more of it. I get it because of what I wrote. You get it because of what you wrote.
I get it because of what I did. I get it because of who I am.
Okay, you get it because of you.
Yes.
I get it because of me. Racism isn't directed at that guy who's a Māori because of what he did or is. It's simply, he's Māori, so it's okay to abuse him. That's racism, and that is different. And that is different. Thank you. Okay,
I agree.
Can I just go to your to your actual question there? The process we did have underway in this country and have had going for decades now has been, on the whole, enlivening, constructive, engaging, difficult, and not linear. It's gone forwards and back and everything, but it has been a process that has meant that Eden Park filled up on Sunday evening with a whole lot of every type of people to do the haka, which meant that the Waikato River has been run on co-governance lines with no problem at all, and everybody involved says this is a great way to do this. It has meant that some things have been, like the maunga in Auckland, for example, hotly disputed how that should be run. It doesn't mean that it's always smooth and plain sailing by any means, but the process we've been engaged in as a live process is now being derailed by this government across a whole range of fronts. What's been taken away, unfunded, abolished and so on, and is going to be really seriously derailed when Seymour's debate kicks off.
There you go. They'll start talking in there. And look, I mean, I do have one more clip when they talk about the defunding, because he's just mentioned of the Te Reo teaching resource. But Sherry, you want to speak to that first?
Yeah, I think he's spot on, and again, I could hear him talk about it forever. And I don't think that Damian Grant is equipped for this discussion. It's not his wheelhouse. He doesn't get it. He has no frame of reference.
Yep.
And I don't think you can have this discussion without empathy, and I don't think he has it.
It's interesting that you would say he doesn't get it, because I think what I heard Simon saying, and we've said this here a few times as well, like in the previous clip, not that one, is that if we don't approach this debate, this conversation correctly, then we shouldn't be approaching this conversation. And it feels like people are saying, well, we're just going to be talking about the treaty principles, and they don't get it. They don't understand how this could be done properly. And when you say he doesn't get it, I think about how many New Zealanders involved in this, it's our debate, we'll have a debate about, don't get it. And I think that's probably quite a high percentage of people.
Yeah, like whenever Seymour is talking about this, I think he's coming at it from like an intellectual position. It'd be a good thing to have a conversation about it. He doesn't get I get where people are saying that maybe David Seymour's not racist. He just does a lot of racist things, or he speaks to a lot of racists. I'm happy to give him the benefit of the doubt to say that he just doesn't see it. He doesn't get it.
Yeah.
But it doesn't change the fact that it's happening. That there are people that are weaponizing this to say some of the most hateful, ugly, ignorant things. And a lot of them are operating from generations of misinformation or lack of understanding or just white supremacist colonizer viewpoints that of what the treaty is. Even down to there's 2 treaties and they're not the same.
Yeah.
Like, I found that out not that long ago. Like, within the last 10 years, that's come into my sort of knowledge space. How many people out there don't know the difference between Te Tiriti and the treaty? How many people that do know that they're 2 think that the treaty is a direct translation and that there are no problems there? This is why when those guys spray painted it in Te Papa, draw a bunch of attention to it. That's why they did it. And it fucking worked. I know people that learned because that was in the news.
All right, we will play this last clip because it's only just over a minute and then we'll wrap up for the night. This is a conversation that they were having about the $30 million worth of teacher resources that this government's just cancelled.
You know, one of the things that's happened recently is this business of teachers being able to learn Te Reo Māori in schools. In the 1960s, the Education Foundation said it was a good idea that teachers were able to communicate effectively with those in their classroom. It took decades and decades before Te Reo Māori got to a point in schools where it could not only be taught to students, but also be learnt by teachers. And now we're throwing away decades-long evidence and also advocacy to get that happening. For what purpose?
So what? This is in reference to what?
The $30 million that's been cut out of Te Reo to go into another program.
I'm not familiar with
so
that.
So for Damian Grant to say I'm not familiar with that just kind of goes to show how he's not even switched into this conversation.
On a weekly news talk show, he did.
Yeah. So if he's not aware of that, that's been a huge story for the last week, and it's integral to understanding what's happening with Māori at the moment, yet he still has very strong opinions about what he thinks should happen. So I was surprised to hear that, but I've only got about 30 seconds to go.
Cut out of Te Reo to go into another program.
I'm not familiar with
so
that.
that's the most recent thing. So what I kept on saying before, it's a litany of things that have been advocated for and built up as a solid, equitable partnership between Crown and the Māori and Māori people for many, many decades. And in one fell swoop of less than 12 months, it's all been swept away.
You know,
and that's the confusing part, because if we want to have a discussion about constitutional reform in New Zealand, then let's have a discussion about constitutional reform, what that might look like in terms of
one of the. There you go, and that's the end clip.